Well, everyone, my name is Justin Hinn, and thanks for coming over to my presentation, Guns, Gamblers, and Grains, the Untold History of Specialty Dansco Albums. So I guess the first question is, who exactly is standing up here today? Well, I'm a coin collector, but I'm also a coin album collector. And online, I'm known as the Dansco Dude. I specialize in Dansco coin albums specifically. And my goal is to collect one of every Dansco album that has ever been made. In fact, I have the world's largest known collection of Dansco albums. And this is an outdated photo. This is over a year old now. This is around 700 different albums and folders. It's now over 800. You can ask my wife for confirmation of that. In fact, it has grown enough that I actually ended up getting an interview over with Spectacular, a coin influencer online. And it was kind of cool to be able to talk about the collection, go over some stories. This is an interesting thumbnail that he created. But another thing I'm also known for is the intersection of technology and coin collecting. I was interviewed over on the Coin World podcast last year, talking about some of the AI applications I've been made. But really, what are we here for today? And it's about these Dansco albums that I've come across and I thought were pretty interesting. So, what do most people think about when they think about a Dansco coin album? They think of albums like this, a brown Supreme album. A lot of you probably already have a United States typeset, 7070. But there's just so much more out there because Dansco's been around since 1937. And over the past 85 years, they've made some pretty interesting products, I would say. And while I do my own research and try to collect one of every Dansco that's been out there, I've come across a couple interesting specialty albums that they've made over into the past. And these are the three albums that I have over here today. And I kind of discovered a couple interesting things about this. These are some very obscure custom albums that Dansco has made. And today I invite you to come in to enjoy some of the fascinating stories that I have learned through my research of the Dansco Corporation and of these albums. So let's start off with a bang. The year is 1979. You get a call over from your assistant. Sir, they just called an emergency session at the legislature, and they need everyone there right now. The president said there's a national crisis and we have to talk. Now, you have no idea what they're talking about. You don't even know what the president's talking about, but it's an emergency session. You got to get there. The president only got in there 6 days ago. So something major must have happened. You rush over to the Capitol building to see what's going on. And as you walk in, the sign above the entrance, as you walk past it, it's the same sign that you walk past 100 times in your career. And it says, the National Assembly of Iraq. You sit down in a smoke-filled room, cigars lit up everywhere. The president, recently elected Saddam Hussein, walks over to the podium and in one firm voice, he states, I have uncovered a plot to overthrow my government. There are traitors among us. And then you notice that there are video cameras placed all around the room. Saddam must have ordered them there. And then Saddam just starts listing the name of parliament members that he calls as traitors. He claims that they were part of the plot. And it just so happens that all the names he's listing are the names of his political opponents. And he calls out your name. Sure, you may have had disagreements with him in the past, but overthrowing him, plotting against him, you stand up and you say, well, I did nothing wrong. Like, why did you say my name? But he doesn't care. He just sits up there and sheds a tear, enjoys a cigar. And at the end, 68 different co-conspirators are named. And at the end, they all start chanting, long live Saddam. But it isn't over yet, because Saddam's security forces are waiting for you on the outside. And what you notice is that your fellow Congress members are over there. and they have a gun over in their hand. And in order to show their loyalty to Saddam, they point over to the gun. They point it over to you. And you see your fellow Congress members getting executed one by one. And it goes down the line. Bang, bang, bang. Now, Saddam purged all of his political opponents in a pretty brazen consolidation of power, and it worked. He showed how far he was willing to go, and no one was willing to stand up against him. Now, there's one thing that Saddam feared more than his own internal government opponents, and that was what was going on in the neighboring country of Iran. Iran was going through its own Islamic revolution, and he feared that Iran was trying to create an uprising over in Iraq. So Saddam answered the Iranian threat the only way that he knew how, and that was through violence. Iraq invaded Iran, and the result would be 8 years of bloody warfare. And it was a bloody war. Iran organized entire divisions of children, some of them as young as 8, literally rushing through the minefields to serve as martyrs so that they would be blown up, so the tanks would have the opportunity to fight against Saddam's forces. And in the end, over 1 million people would end up dead. But war is not just paid over in lives. It's also paid over in debt. And when the war ended, Iraq ended up owing $14 billion over to Kuwait. Well, given interest rates and the state of the Iraqi economy, there was a real chance that Iraq would end up collapsing under its own debt. So how did Saddam respond to this again? Once again, with violence. And that was his justification ultimately for invading Kuwait. Take over the country, take over the oil fields, wipe away the debt. Now, he ended up beginning to secure thousands of soldiers across the Kuwaiti border, but America thought that it wasn't going to let Saddam end up controlling 65% of the world's oil supply. And now we end up here in Operation Desert Storm. It could be the largest combat operation since World War II. By the end of it, there would be 1.5 million soldiers involved, 4,500 tanks, 484 million aircraft. And an interesting story I also came across. One of the world's longest bombing missions. On January 16th, 1991, 7 of these B-52 Stratus Fortress bombers took off from Barksdale Air Force and flew all the way over to Iraq. And in over 16 hours, it ended up reaching over in Iraq. And for the first time in warfare, GPS guided missiles were actually used for the first time in warfare. I thought it was pretty cool. A 35-hour flying mission and 14,000 miles nonstop. But that was only to start the war off, and 100 hours later, what was the end result? 50,000 killed, 75,000 wounded, and 35,000 tanks destroyed. This photo was taken over, I believe it was called the Highway of Death, famously enough. But this brought me about to an interesting quote by former U.S. Major General Smedley Butler. "The war racket has always been a good racket, and it's a racket that keeps on paying." And you know what? He was totally, absolutely right, because right after Desert Storm, all of these commemorative coins just started flooding and appearing over into the marketplace. And this is where our journey begins today. Because you see, I ended up finding this Dansco album titled Desert Storm Coin Collection. Okay, that seems pretty interesting, and got it out over here. It's a really odd album because I have never seen a Dansco album ever relate directly over back into the war. And I'll pass this around, see if you can notice some of the interesting things that I'll end up pointing out over here. But these are just some of the things that are over into the album itself. It spans across 5 different pages, an interesting intro. I'll show some more of the coins in depth later. But all of these different coins Wish the quality was a little bit higher, but it was pointing out like specific equipment that was used, certain tanks, certain missiles. They really dug in to see anything that they could make over with the coin to commemorate. But as the book goes around, I opened it up after I purchased it. These two pieces of paper fell out over here. The certificate of authenticity, okay, worthless. But I noticed over here on the bottom, it was signed by a Todd Parker, and it said Director of the Mint. Now, I had never heard of a Todd Parker as a Director of the U.S. Mint because there hadn't been one. This tried to give the impression it was actually minted by the U.S. Mint. They never did any sort of commemorative coin program for Desert Storm. And that was really odd. Why were these things out there? In fact, when I searched Todd Parker's name, it turned out that he actually was the owner of a coin shop called Continental Coin and Jewelry Company in Southern California. And then when I looked at the coins deeper, it got even more confusing because we see over here, it says Hutt River Province over at the top. Well, when I searched online, the mystery only got a little bit bigger because Hutt River Province kept going back to this seemingly random place over in Western Australia. And I kept seeing this flag that just kept coming up over in search results. So you see, our story takes us over from the Middle East and California, and it takes us all the way to Australia to a man named Leonard Castley. Leonard was a World War II veteran, and he settled in Western Australia and ended up becoming his own wheat farmer. And with the world's agricultural supply completely destroyed from World War II, business was pretty booming for him for a couple of years. However, in 1969, things would change. The Australian Wheat Board over here, farmers like Castley, they increased their wheat harvest year after year, and they reported over to the Australian Wheat Board. Thing is, by the time 1969 rolled around, the federal government started growing concerned about an oversupply of wheat, just rippling damage across the entire economy. And in that year, in 1969, Leonard was preparing to harvest 10,000 acres when the Australian Wheat Board came over to him and said, "You can only harvest 100. Like, huh? Yeah, you're going to do 100, and we're not going to compensate you. And if you don't agree with us, we're going to throw you in jail, and we're going to take away your property." And Leonard just kept protesting at every level of the government, but no one listened and no one cared. In fact, the Australian Parliament was preparing to pass legislation to force the farmers to comply with throwing them in jail. Leonard Castley, he had a couple other ideas. If the Australian government wasn't going to be reasonable, then there really was only one answer: succession. On April 21st, 1970, he declared that his farmland was now sovereign and not subject to any of the Australian law. He wrote a letter to the Prime Minister, and he cited the British Treason Act of 1495, which stated that a person serving as a de facto ruler of a land could not be guilty of treason. And because he had formed the Hutt River Province, the hostile government of Australia could not legally take over his lands and could not take over his wheat. But it didn't end there. Because even though Australian government said it would never accept, he wasn't going to go down without a fight. So he responded the only way a rational man could. Just after 5 p.m. on February 2nd, 1977, Leonard Castley, he sent a telegram to the Prime Minister. And the contents were pretty ominous. Confirming my letter of the 28th of November regarding your government's lack of respect of the laws, not only on my people, but also on the people of your country. It is my official responsibility to declare that a state of war now exists between our respective countries, and diplomatic relations at this time are now severed. They were at war. Well, 2 days later, a second telegram was then sent over, which stated, the state of war between our countries has now ceased. Because according to Prince Leonard, he had an admittedly inaccurate reading of the 1949 Geneva Convention, but the convention stated a nation should show full respect to a nation that it has failed to defeat in war. Because Australia did not defeat the Hutt River province, well, obviously now it must show respect. So it's some interesting times. It was a time of war back then, but now it was a time for peace. It was a time to build an empire. And this brings us over to the early 1980s. An entrepreneur by the name of Kevin Gale, pictured right over here in the middle, he became acquainted with Prince Leonard and saw a big marketing potential with Hutt River Province. So how did he market Hutt River Province? Well, exactly like what you saw over in those coins. It turned out that Prince Kevin was the mastermind behind all of these fascinating coins that you see over in this album as it goes out. But it wasn't just the Desert Storm collection. It was all of these different things. And they were all pretty much targeted at the American audience. Like there's a coin about Clinton. Like, why is that even there? And what about like a Supersaurus, like a dinosaur set? Whatever sold, he was willing to make it and put the Hutt River Province label on it. This fun niche that this successionist government province in Australia was minting some interesting stuff out there. But it wasn't just coins. They also did stamps. And yeah, everything from parrots, wildflowers, International Year of the Disabled, and it also went over into currency as well. We see over here Prince Leonard printed on some fascinating notes, which was actually legal tender in the province itself. If you somehow secured it, you could have bought stuff there. And during this rambunctious time, Prince Leonard, who was busy with his royal duties, for example, he tried to seek UN recognition. That didn't work. And he also petitioned to join the Olympic Committee, which also got turned down. But he also sought to build good relationships with Her Majesty and the United Kingdom. Over here is a copy of a letter that was sent over from Queen Elizabeth's correspondence. Here she stated in her response, "Dear Sir, the Queen has asked me to thank you for your letter sent on the occasion of the Queen's 90th birthday. Your thoughtfulness is much appreciated. In return, I am to convey Her Majesty's good wishes to you and to all concerned for a most enjoyable and successful celebration on the 23rd and 24th of April to mark the 46th anniversary of your principality. The Queen was sorry to learn about your recent fall, and Her Majesty hopes that you are now fully recovered." I thought this was quite funny because it slightly recognized the sovereignty of the principality, and let's just say the Australian Prime Minister was not happy when this letter came out. Now, when I investigated this album and some of the coins in them, I found something that was a little bit odd because it says Hutt River Province on the top. What is this over here in the middle saying like New Queensland Mint? Because when I searched up New Queensland, it kept pulling me to the complete opposite side of Australia, over to the Gold Coast area. So like, how are these two connected? Why are they there? And it ended up turning out that Prince Kevin, who had been working with Prince Leonard to do all these marketing stints, well, he had set up his own operation over in the New Queensland area. And that's when I uncovered the story about treachery. Because initially the sales were pretty good with these commemorative coins over to the United States, but Prince Kevin got a little bit greedy. And it turned out that he had actually set up his own legal entity so that he could sell these coins and not have to report all of the income back over to Prince Leonard in the Hutt River Province. And he'd been doing this for years. What you see is the result of that coin itself saying Hutt River Province. That wasn't minted by the actual Hutt River Province. It wasn't given permission by Prince Leonard. That was Prince Kevin's treasonous behavior of making money behind Prince Leonard's back. So it's not even really from Hutt River Province. So Prince Leonard, he started finding out that there was this treachery back in the 90s. And he demanded that Prince Kevin come back so that he can answer for his crimes, maybe even be beheaded. What was the end result? Well, really nothing, because Prince Kevin died of a heart attack suddenly before he was able to go back to Hutt River Province. Not really a big climax there, but it was fun to hear about this treachery. But, wrapping up over at the final years, Prince Kevin and Princess Shirley, they ruled the principality over with their 7 children, and you could have visited the province if you wanted to. 50,000 people flew in and visited the province every single year. It made some good money, and you could have bought some stamps and some of the currency there. But all good things must come to an end. After a 45-year reign, Prince Leonard passed away on February 13th, 2019. His reign would be passed down to his son, Prince Gam. But soon after, even the principality would collapse. In late 2019, the hostile country of Australia saw an opportunity to attack. Looking to contain the COVID-19 outbreak, the federal government forced the province to close its borders to all the tourists. And with all the income gone, well, within a year, the entire Hutt River province would collapse. And on August 3rd, 2020, it would formally dissolve. And the Australian tax office would have the final laugh, because they would come on in and demanded that all the proceeds that the principality got from sales, they had to pay back 45 years of unpaid taxes. I'll end the story here on how this is the actual anthem of the Hutt River Province. I won't read it out there, but the theme of it all is that it is a place where you can aspire for your dreams and make it there, even though it was only like a 50 square mile barren desert. It's okay. That's where dreams are made. But not all dreams are of political independence. Some dream of striking it rich. Some even dream of hitting the jackpot. Now, that's a dream that Hutt River Province couldn't fulfill, but it's one that only Sin City could satisfy. Let's go over to gamblers. So I'd like to talk a quick story about this man here, this mobster, Elmer Bones F. Remmer. He worked over in northern Nevada, and he was known for being a member of the McKay Crime Syndicate. And he ran a couple clubs, some of them known more in California, like the Oaks Club and the Menlo Club. But this man was extremely violent. Like he beat people up. He shook them down over for money. That totally fulfills the stereotype of these mobsters. And we always think of mobsters as the ones who are committing these crimes and violence. But it's not always them who's shaking others down for money. Because sometimes the biggest criminals are the ones that are in elected office. This is a certificate of Mountain City Consolidated Copper Company. I'm still trying to find the actual piece of paper for this. But this comes in because in 1946, a man named Pat Mooney of the Nevada Internal Revenue's office, he went over to Elmer and he made an offer that he could not refuse. See, Elmer was in a lot of debt. He owed about $30,000 worth of taxes to the federal government. And Pat Mooney, being the field officer, essentially for the Nevada IRS, offered him a way out. He told Elmer, buy $52,000 worth of my company, this Consolidated Copper Company shares, and I will fudge the numbers on your tax forms and make your problem go away. Well, the crime happened, but then the San Francisco Examiner newspaper uncovered it and published it. And both Elmer and Pat Mooney ended up being convicted and put in jail for some time. Now, mobsters and government officials, they try to escape justice. They try to escape the law, but sometimes, it does catch up. But there is one law that we cannot escape for all of us. And that is the law of supply and demand, because during this time, silver prices were going up, up, and up. This chart is over from the 1920s over to 1930s. The world financial markets, after over the world wars, eventually we saw a lot of marketing, manufacturing start taking up silver. And as silver saw more commercial uses and adoption within economies, the price and value of it kept going up and up and up. And in November 1961, prices were jumping up so much that the U.S. federal government suspended the sale of bullion by the Treasury that was formerly at a fixed price of 91 cents. Basically, they said, the Treasury, to make sure you don't get depleted, you now have to sell at fair price, fair market value. There's a problem with that, though, because in 1963, silver had hit $1.29, and that was exactly the amount of silver that was in a Morgan and Peace dollar. And which industry heavily relies on people spending Morgan and Peace dollars? It's the casinos. People are using dollar points for that. Well, this is a problem because once it went over $1.29, all the casinos started seeing that everyone was hoarding all of their silver dollars. Why would you go to the casino and spend $1 and possibly win something, or you can just keep your dollar, inflates up, and then you can sell the silver content there? This is a problem because the casino owners and the mob end up knocking at the Nevada Gaming Commission's door to try to figure out the solution. People weren't spending their silver dollars, and it's not going to go back down. And this is how we end up with the birth of gaming tokens. The Nevada Gaming Commission and Nevada State Legislature, they worked together to try to figure out a problem, and this idea emerged. What if we turned to private mints, and instead of them minting silver dollars, they mint dollar gaming tokens? Well, the Coinage Act of 1864 specifically banned private mints from creating any sort of legal tender, but in consultation between the Nevada Gaming Commission, the casino mobsters, and all the like, the U.S. Treasury granted them an exemption for casinos to be able to print tokens that could be considered legal tender, at least on that property. And this was a great opportunity because all the private mints around the country were clamoring towards each other because they wanted to print these millions of different gaming tokens out there. But only one private mint would end up being the sole provider of all these coins. And that mint's name was General Numismatist Corporation. But actually, it's a little division within GNC. It goes by the name of the Franklin Mint. In July 1965, they began minting the first gaming tokens over for casinos. And between 65 and 68, they would produce millions of gaming tokens for almost over 100 casinos, including a few foreign casinos, interestingly enough. So what did these tokens look like? They came in a wide variety. It was very fascinating. The casinos had a lot of input into what they wanted the designs to be. And the Franklin Mint for these series had a couple breakdowns from proof, proof-like, and copper. They initially wanted to just make it for the casinos themselves, but they realized there was a massive marketing opportunity to sell these tokens directly over to the general public. And in order to get over to the general public, they had to partner up with a coin album company to be able to help those collectors collect entire sets. And that's how we end up seeing some of these albums. Over here is one made over by Whitman for the 1965 series. I have the one on the right, and I'm still trying to figure out who ended up making it. It's not like a Dansco or Whitman, but they also ended up partnering up with the Dansco Corporation as well. And this is where I have this album over here today. It's the 1966 Gaming Tokens album. It's not the silver version on it, so please don't steal any coins. They're probably not worth that much. But they have some very fun, intricate designs out over there. This one spans about 6 to 7 different pages. And as it goes through, really take a moment to look at the designs. And this is what you see is how the casino wanted to present itself to the wider public. But I want you to also I want you to look at the very last page of this album, because you might find a familiar name. This is where I found this little sticker on the back of this album. That's Pat Mooney, if it's too far back to see. It was printed, and it says pure silver proof set, presented by the Franklin Mint to Pat Mooney, a distinguished citizen of the state of Nevada. Yeah, it was fascinating because it turned out that when each year that these casino tokens were issued and put into these albums, the casinos would hand them out to politicians and well-connected members of the community who made the casino tokens happen. And it was kind of cool to see this and think, oh, Pat, he must have been a pretty nice guy. Oh, he actually had a conviction for tax fraud with a mobster a couple of years before. But springs over into to my next story over here, which I totally forgot the transition for because I lost it. But over here, I want to talk a little bit about food security, because at the end of World War II, the United Nations, it was created to prevent another global war. But as part of the UN Charter, it actually was tasked with solving another war. And this was the war against food insecurity, and specifically famine. Famine, it's one of the worst experiences that humanity still suffers over today. Millions of people still starve, and some people even over here in our country. But we often don't put a face on it. It's usually some sort of esoteric idea of, oh, those are other people that are suffering. And that's why this photo was very powerful. It's a Pulitzer Prize winning photo of a Sudanese famine. I don't even need to describe the photo. It's clear enough what it's speaking about. The sad thing about this photo is that the photographer, his name is Kevin Carter, he took his life at age 33, a couple of years after this photo was taken, because of the traumas and the horrible things that he saw. At least from what I've researched, they believe the child did survive, and he did make it to a center. But it spoke to people. And the United Nations, the people working there under this organization called the Food and Agricultural Organization, they felt that this was a war that was worth fighting, but they wanted to get the message out there that this was important. So how did they do this? Well, in 1968, the leaders at the UN FAO, they undertook and orchestrated one of the largest numismatic projects that has ever taken on this planet that most people do not know about. They coordinated with over 100 governments and mints around the world, and they invited them, join this program, you design a coin or various coins. The theme just has to be food insecurity is something that is worth fighting against. And the designs of these coins were pretty global. It spanned over 100 countries. I think there's even some turtle coins over in here as well.
Of course.
There's actually some gold coins that some governments minted around for the FAO project that they had over here. Super fascinating stuff. And the thing is, these coins were not commemorative. They were meant for circulation. They are in circulation today. Like, you can find these coins very easily if you just go through a pile of foreign world coins. And when the program started being built out, they realized that, hey, we want to cater over to coin collectors. How can we get them also interested in this? So, of course, they needed a coin album to hold all of these in. What I have over here is a 1968 Dansco-made UN FAO album. And Dansco was the only approved manufacturer of these coin albums for this UN FAO series over from 1968 to 1978. And I invite you guys to look through and enjoy the coins over in these. There are no gold coins in there. Sorry about that, but it's pretty beautiful. This was a time period when Dansco was making the transition over from their red Continental Line series and moving over towards the brown albums we know over today. And well, during my research, I found something that was I thought was very funny and spoke a lot of us today. How many folks here are dealers? Just curious, like raise your hand if you sell whatnot. How many of you guys have tried purchasing like a Dansco album or have sought a Dansco album, but you can't find it because they're out of stock? Yeah, it's pretty awful. Like the narrative normally is like, okay, COVID, they had to move over from LA to Washington, they got flooded. I get it, things are bad. Well, it turns out that I came across this letter that was sent by the organizer of the UN FAO program to all the collectors who are trying to get an album. And you can't read it, but basically it said, hey, Dansco's kind of behind production right now. It's going to take like another 6 months. Just a heads up. We hope this doesn't happen again. Kind of funny that even 60 years ago, it was still a problem. But in closing, I just want to share what I think is just unappreciated about these coin albums. Coin albums, for me personally, they're not just something that we store our coins in. It's a representation at the end of the day of the history that these coins have gone through. And they have their own history all about themselves. And they cover some fascinating series and topics that I never thought I would ever get into. So I guess my message is I invite you the next time you see an odd looking album over in a coin store, coin shop, just check it out. See what's in there. Maybe it's something that's worth picking up and maybe filling out, because at the end of the day, it's all history, and I think that's a big part of what draws us here. So thank you. I appreciate you guys taking the time, and just some sources and some last thanks. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Justin. Questions?
Jerry?
Justin, I noticed in the Casino Token album, there's quite a few holes. Are you attempting ever to fill those?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to.
Curious if you just were more interested in just having the holder and not necessarily completing it.
Oh, it is an impossible goal, but I want every single hole in every single one of my albums to be completely filled out.
How many albums are there? You have 800 of them. How many exist to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, I think there's around 900. From what I have, so those are albums and folders. The Dansco albums, like the Supreme albums, kind of like the style that you guys see there, I've only documented around 310. But every single week, I get someone hitting me up over on Instagram and saying, do you know about this? And I'm like, wait, first off, no. Second, are you going to sell that? Because I want that. And they say no, pay me a lot. But Dansco's fascinating because there was a time you as an individual collector or dealer can go to them and say, hey, I want you to make an album about the Rosemont Parade. And I need all the holes to be this certain size and this title to say this. And Dansco would say, all right, that'll cost us $700 for one album. If you're willing to pay that $700, you got it. Even if it was just an order of one. So there's almost like a limitless amount of customs out there that I'm not aware of. I'm trying to find.
Percentage-wise, how many of your albums do you have with coins actually in them, and how's that compared to ones that you don't have anything in them at all?
90% of my albums have at least one coin in them. 40 to 50% of my albums have at least 70% filled out. Everything that is like post 1965 and above, I pretty much have. It's like over 10,000 coins. It makes moving not fun.
Did you say that they started in 1937? Dansco, there's this Lincoln Penny album that I got. It's 1929.
1929.
It says, it's 1909 to 1929. It's just a full open one like that.
Are you saying the copyright date on it was 1929?
No, the penny just spans 1909 to 1929.
Oh, so the Dansco Corporation started in 1939, but they covered series like the Lincoln Penny, 1909. The company itself was made that year.
Yeah, but why did they go up to only 1929 then?
Oh, chances are that copyright there is either 39, 41, possibly up to 50, depending on it. They only went up to a certain year. I've noticed with those this early edition folders. Basically, they didn't go anything past like the late 40s and 50s that they would print in. There's just limited space. It's the early edition folders is something I'm still trying to tackle down, but they lost all their documentation in a flood, and they're already like 3 generations into the family.
I'll bring it and show you.
How much information did you obtain from Dave Lang's family after he passed? And because he had a massive collection, and he was kind of the guy that did this.
He was the guy for this. For context, for those who don't know, David Lang, he was one of the head researchers over at NGC, and he was known as the coin board guy, as well as coin albums and coin folders. He loved the history that it represented, especially when it came over to coin boards. A lot of my research, especially with the Continental line, was over from David Lang. All of this was originally myself. His research is absolutely invaluable. He made books diving over into the Whitman Library of Coins. He made 4 books about coin boards and coin albums. His 5th one that he was working on was going to be about the Dansco Corporation, and he had already gotten some notes. But then he passed away from cancer before he was able to make it. I was able to get in connection with his estate to get over some notes, but I would say a solid 20 to 30% of my collection came directly from David Lang. A lot of the custom albums that I didn't know existed came over from him. And I'm trying to build on that, and maybe you can finish his last book. I don't know. That's kind of my hope. With that, thanks a lot, guys. The books will go around. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you for your time.